The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal towers of Station Prime as Ambassador Lisa Morgan walked through the corridors that had become as familiar to her as the streets of her hometown in Ohio. She carried herself with the same quiet dignity that had marked her 3 decades of service to Earth, her simple gray uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial armor and flowing robes worn by the other species that called this place home. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the usual pre-session activity. War Prime Nexmore of the Korath hegemony stood near the massive viewing windows, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights as he spoke in harsh clicks and growls to his subordinates. The sound always reminded Lisa of insects, though she had learned long ago to keep such observations to herself. The Korath were proud warriors who had conquered 17 star systems through sheer military might, and they did not appreciate comparisons to Earth's smaller creatures. Chancellor Zithara of the Vex Empire glided past on her mechanical legs, the cybernetic implants that covered half her face blinking with constant data streams. The Vex had achieved their dominance through technology, turning themselves into living machines over countless generations until the line between flesh and metal had become meaningless. They viewed purely biological species like humans with something approaching pity. Near the center of the chamber, Elder Quineth of the Zephyrian Collective meditated in his floating chair, his ancient form barely visible within the energy field that kept his failing body alive. The Zephyrians were old beyond measure, having achieved interstellar travel when most species were still discovering fire. They considered themselves the wisest beings in the galaxy, and their patience with younger civilizations was legendary. Lisa took her assigned seat in the smallest section of the chamber, where Earth's delegation of 12 humans looked almost absurdly tiny compared to the hundreds of representatives from the major powers. Captain Jake Harrison nodded to her as she sat down, his weathered face showing the calm that came from 20 years of mediating disputes between species that could crush humanity without effort. Dr. Allen Foster was already reviewing his notes on today's agenda, his quick mind cataloging every detail that might prove useful in the discussions ahead. The session began with routine matters: trade disputes between minor worlds, requests for technological assistance, and the endless bureaucratic details that kept a galaxy-spanning civilization functioning. Lisa participated when required, offering Earth's usual measured responses and carefully worded suggestions. When the Vex demanded increased mining quotas from the Outer Rim colonies, she politely suggested a gradual increase that would allow the colonists time to expand their operations. When 2 minor species brought a border dispute before the Council, she proposed a compromise that gave both sides access to the disputed resources. It was during the 4th hour of the session that the real business began. War Prime Vexmore rose from his position, his massive form commanding immediate attention from every being in the chamber. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. The Korath hegemony claims dominion over the Kepler system, he announced, his translated words echoing through the chamber's acoustic systems. Our fleets will take possession within 7 rotations. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. The Kepler system was home to the Millerian colonies, peaceful farmers who had never bothered anyone and possessed no military forces worthy of the name. They were not members of the Galactic Council, which meant they had no official protection under interstellar law. Elder Quineth opened his ancient eyes. The Millerians are a farming people with no strategic value. Why does the hegemony seek to claim their worlds? Vexmore's mandibles clicked in what Lisa had learned to recognize as amusement. The Korath require additional agricultural output to feed our expanding fleets. The Millerians will serve this purpose under our guidance. The euphemism fooled no one. Under Korath guidance meant slavery, just as it had for dozens of other peaceful species who had found themselves in the path of the hegemony's expansion. Lisa felt the familiar knot form in her stomach, the same feeling she had experienced hundreds of times over the years as she watched injustice unfold in the name of galactic politics. She stood slowly, waiting for the recognition that would allow her to speak. Around the chamber, she could feel the weight of dismissive attention from beings who had learned to expect predictable responses from Earth's representatives. "The Millerians are a peaceful people who have never threatened anyone," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "They have developed sustainable farming techniques that could benefit many worlds. Perhaps the Korath could consider establishing trade agreements rather than conquest." The silence that followed was broken by what could only be described as laughter from the Korath delegation. War Prime Thexmore's entire body shook with mirth, and several of his subordinates joined in with their own clicking sounds. "The soft-skins speak of trade," Thexmore said when his amusement subsided. "Humans, your species has much to learn about the realities of galactic power. The strong take what they require. The weak serve or perish. This is the natural order." "Chancellor." Zathara's mechanical voice joined the conversation. "The human suggestion is noted but irrelevant. The Millerians possess no technology or resources that the Korath cannot simply claim through conquest. There is no logical reason to negotiate when superior force can achieve the same result more efficiently." Lisa remained standing, her expression unchanged, despite the casual dismissal of both her people and the Millerians. Around the chamber, delegates from dozens of species watched the familiar scene play out. Earth would make its polite objection, the major powers would explain why. Such objections were meaningless, and the session would move on to other matters. "I understand the Council's position," Lisa said finally. "Earth formally requests that the Millerians be given opportunity to negotiate their own terms with the Korath hegemony." More laughter from the Korath delegation. "Negotiate?" Thexmore seemed genuinely puzzled by the concept. "What do farmers have to offer warriors? Their compliance is the only term that matters." Lisa nodded and returned to her seat. To observers, it appeared that Earth had once again been politely dismissed after making its predictable plea for mercy toward a weaker species. Captain Harrison made a note in his official record. Dr. Foster continued reviewing his research materials. The session moved on to other business. What none of the other delegates noticed was the small device Lisa pressed as she sat down, or the brief signal. It transmitted to a communication relay hidden within Earth's diplomatic quarters. The message was simple, consisting of only a few code words, but its implications would reshape the galaxy across the chamber. War Prime Thexmore was already discussing deployment schedules with his subordinates, confident that the Kepler system would soon join the long list of worlds that had learned to serve the Korath will. The humans, as always, had been polite about their objections. It was what made them so useful as mediators and so irrelevant as opponents. He had no way of knowing that humanity's politeness was about to undergo a fundamental change. 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Paul Turner stood in a room that did not officially exist. The walls were lined with screens showing star maps, ship positions, and data streams from across the galaxy. Officers moved between workstations with the quiet efficiency of people who had trained for this moment their entire careers. Even though most of the galaxy believed Earth possessed no military worth mentioning, Lieutenant Sophie Banks approached with a datapad in her hands. Her young face showed the same calm determination that marked every person in the facility. She had grown up knowing that someday humanity might need to reveal what they had been building in secret, and that day had finally arrived. The signal from Ambassador Morgan came through 20 minutes ago, she reported. "All stations are confirming receipt and moving to operational status." Turner nodded as he studied the main display. Red dots marked the positions of Korath fleets throughout their territory, while blue indicators showed the locations of ships that the galaxy knew as Earth's humble merchant marine. What the other species had never realized was that these cargo vessels carried far more than trade goods in their holds. "Status on the Liberty?" Turner asked. "Captain Palmer confirms his crew is ready," Banks replied. "They will intercept the Korath Third Fleet as planned." The SS Liberty looked like any other human cargo hauler from the outside. Her hull was scarred from years of routine service, her engines were the standard civilian model, and her crew quarters were cramped in. the way that suggested a tight budget rather than military priorities. Captain Greg Palmer had spent 15 years playing the role of a simple merchant, hauling supplies between worlds and making the kind of modest profit that kept Earth's economy running. What the galaxy did not know was that Palmer had graduated, first in his class from Earth's hidden naval academy. His crew of 12 included some of humanity's most skilled engineers, tacticians, and weapons specialists. The Liberty's cargo holds contained technology that would make the Galactic Council's most advanced warships look like toys built by children. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. On the farming world of New Montana, Bill Jenkins walked across his fields as he had done every morning for 20 years. His neighbors knew him as a quiet man who grew excellent corn and minded his own business. They did not know that his barn contained enough military equipment to outfit an entire battalion, or that he had spent 2 decades training with weapon systems that did not officially exist. Jenkins received the coded transmission while feeding his chickens. He walked to his barn with the same unhurried pace he used for all his daily chores, pressed his hand against what appeared to be an ordinary wooden wall, and watched as a hidden panel slid aside. The chamber beyond was filled with weapons, communication, gear, and supplies that had been carefully positioned and maintained for years. Similar caches were being opened across dozens of worlds. The elderly woman who ran a small bookstore on Centauri Prime revealed herself to be an expert in alien psychology and warfare. The young man who taught school on New Geneva activated communication systems that connected him to intelligence networks spanning the galaxy. The retired couple who grew vegetables on the outer colonies began preparing weapons that had been disguised as farming equipment. Colonel Amy Peterson stood in her laboratory on Luna, surrounded by devices that represented 30 years of careful research and development. Her teams had studied every species in the Galactic Council, mapping their biological weaknesses and technological vulnerabilities with the patience of scientists and the focus of warriors, the Korath. Exoskeletons that made them nearly invulnerable to energy weapons would shatter when exposed to specific sound frequencies. The Vex cybernetic implants that gave them their technological superiority could be disabled by electromagnetic pulses calibrated to avoid human electronics. Every major species had weaknesses that Earth scientists had identified and learned to exploit. The sonic disruptors are loaded on all vessels operating in Korath space, Peterson reported to Turner via secure communication. The EMP generators are positioned throughout Vex territory. The biological agents designed for the Zephyrian metabolism are ready for deployment if necessary. Turner reviewed the reports coming in from across human space. Teachers were revealing themselves to be intelligence analysts. Shopkeepers were activating hidden communication networks. Farmers were preparing weapon systems that had been buried beneath their fields for decades. The galaxy had spent 30 years watching humans go about their quiet business, never realizing that every human settlement was also a military installation. Dr. Helen Carter worked from her research station in the asteroid belt, coordinating the largest intelligence operation in galactic history. Her teams had been gathering information for 3 decades, cataloging everything from the personal habits of alien leaders to the precise location of every major military installation in Council space. We have real-time tracking on all major fleet movements, she reported to Turner. Our assets in alien territories are confirming their positions and preparing for possible action. The assets she referred to were humans who had spent years working throughout alien space. They had taken jobs as laborers in Vex mining operations, clerks in Korath administrative centers, and researchers in Zephyrian archives. The galaxy had welcomed these hardworking humans who seemed eager to serve and learn, never suspecting that each one was gathering intelligence and preparing for the day when Earth might need to act. In the Vex capital system, maintenance worker Steve Rogers had spent 5 years repairing equipment in their most secure facilities. His access codes allowed him to plant microscopic devices throughout their infrastructure, devices that could disable their most important systems with a single command. The Vex had praised his dedication and efficiency, never realizing that Their entire communication network was now under human control throughout Korath space. Human laborers had been installing what appeared to be standard industrial equipment in mining facilities and manufacturing centers. The Korath had been pleased to receive such hard-working assistance, especially from a species they considered naturally servile. They had no idea that the equipment contained weapon systems designed specifically to neutralize Korath military. Advantages. Turner studied the tactical display one final time. Every major alien fleet, base, and industrial center was marked with indicators showing human assets in position. 30 years of careful planning and patient preparation had created a network that spanned the galaxy, hidden beneath the facade of Earth's humble merchant and diplomatic services. "Send the activation signal," he ordered. "Inform all units that the demonstration phase is beginning." Across the galaxy, the message went out through communication channels that the other species had never detected. The words were simple, but their meaning would reshape interstellar politics forever. "The kid. Gloves are coming off." The Korath Third Fleet emerged from hyperspace in the Kepler system with the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. War Commander Nexhul stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the peaceful farming worlds appear on his tactical display. 12 destroyer-class vessels and 4 heavy cruisers made up his force, more than enough firepower to reduce any resistance to burning debris within minutes. "Scan for defensive installations," he ordered his weapons officer. The Millerians were known to be a gentle people who had never developed military technology, but Korath doctrine demanded thorough preparation before any conquest. "No orbital platforms detected," came the reply. "No military vessels in system. Long-range sensors show only civilian transports and agricultural equipment." Nexhul felt satisfaction flow through his consciousness. Another easy victory for the hegemony, another world that would learn to serve Korath interests. His mandibles clicked with anticipation as he prepared to broadcast the surrender demand that would make the conquest official. Then his communications officer spoke with confusion in his voice. "War Commander, we are receiving a transmission from a human vessel." "Human?" Nexhul turned toward the sensor station. "Show me." The main screen displayed a small cargo ship drifting between the Korath fleet and the inner planets. The vessel looked ancient by galactic standards, her hull marked with the scratches and burns that came from decades of honest trade. Her identification beacon marked her as the SS Liberty, registered to Earth's merchant marine with a crew of 12. "What is a human trader doing in this system?" Nexhul asked. His tactical officer was already running scans on the small vessel. "Standard cargo configuration," the officer reported. "No weapons detected, minimal shielding. Single human life signs aboard." Captain Greg Palmer sat in the Liberty's command chair, watching the massive Korath fleet approach his position. His crew worked quietly at their stations, their faces showing the calm that came from years of preparation for this exact moment. Engineer Kate Mills monitored the special systems hidden within their cargo holds. Weapons specialist Danny Foster kept watch on the targeting computers that did not appear on any official manifest. Palmer opened a communication channel to the Korath fleet. His voice carried the same polite tone that had marked every human interaction with alien species for 30 years. "Korath vessels, this is Captain Palmer of the Earth merchant ship Liberty," he said. "I am afraid I cannot allow you to proceed to the Millerian colonies." The silence that followed lasted exactly 12 seconds. When War Commander Nexhul finally responded, his voice carried the disbelief of someone who had just heard an insect threaten a giant. "Human vessel, you will withdraw immediately or be destroyed," Nexhul said. "You have 30 seconds to comply with this order." Palmer looked at his crew. Engineer Mills nodded from her station. Weapons Specialist Foster confirmed his systems. "We're ready?" Navigator Lisa Brooks had already calculated the optimal positioning for what was about to happen. "War Commander, I really hoped it would not come to this," Palmer said with genuine sadness in his voice. "Please reconsider your position. This is your final warning." Nexhul's laughter echoed through his bridge. A single human cargo ship was issuing warnings to an entire Korath battle fleet. The absurdity was so complete that even his usually Disciplined crew began clicking with amusement. "Destroy the human vessel," Nexhul ordered. "Show these farmers what happens to those who interfere with Korath operations." 16 ships opened fire simultaneously. Plasma cannons and particle beams lit up the darkness of space as enough firepower to level a city focused on the tiny human freighter. The energy discharge was so intense that it briefly outshone the system's star. Palmer watched the incoming weapons fire with the same calm expression he might use while reviewing shipping manifests. "Now would be good," he said to his engineer, Mills. Pressed a series of controls that activated systems hidden throughout the Liberty's cargo holds. The ship's external appearance did not change, but space around the vessel suddenly filled with an energy field that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about human technology. The Korath weapons struck the field and stopped. For a moment that seemed to last forever, the combined firepower of an entire fleet hung motionless in space, held by forces that should not have existed. Then the field collapsed inward and exploded outward again, sending every beam and plasma bolt back toward its source with twice the original power. 3 Korath destroyers vanished in brilliant flashes as their own weapons tore through their hulls. The remaining ships found their weapon systems overloading as reflected energy fed back through their firing circuits. Emergency klaxons wailed across the fleet as ship after ship lost power to their primary systems. "Impossible," Nexhul whispered as his flagship went dark around him. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across his bridge while his crew worked frantically to restore basic functions. Palmer opened the communication channel again. "War Commander, I hope this demonstrates that humanity prefers to avoid violence." "Whenever possible," he said. "However, we are quite capable of defending innocent people when necessary." The Liberty's cargo bays opened fully for the first time, revealing not trade goods but a swarm of small fighter craft that moved unlike anything ever seen in galactic warfare. Each fighter was controlled by artificial intelligence that had spent 30 years studying Korath tactics, learning their weaknesses, and preparing for exactly this moment. The fighters moved through the disabled Korath fleet like dancers performing a deadly ballet. They used precision that no biological pilot could match, targeting life support systems, navigation controls, and communication arrays with surgical accuracy. Within minutes, the mighty Korath Third Fleet was drifting helplessly in space, their crews alive but completely unable to fight back. Navigator Brooks activated the Liberty's tractor systems, powerful enough to move ships many times larger than the small freighter. One by one, the disabled Korath vessels were gathered together like toys collected by a careful child. Palmer's voice returned to the communication channels, still carrying that maddening politeness that had marked every human diplomatic contact. "For 3 decades. War Commander Nexhul, your fleet is being towed to the nearest neutral port," he said. "Your crews will be treated well and returned to Korath space once your government agrees to abandon all claims on the Kepler system. I do hope this demonstrates that humanity's patience, while considerable, is not unlimited." Throughout the galaxy, monitoring stations belonging to every major species recorded the engagement in stunned silence. The humans, the quiet neighbors who had never raised their voice in 30 years of galactic politics, had just effortlessly neutralized an entire Korath battle fleet without killing a single enemy combatant. The implications would take time to fully understand, but one thing was immediately clear to every intelligence analyst who reviewed the data. Humanity had been holding back for 30 years, and their patience had finally run out. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened less than 6 hours after the Kepler incident. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the crystal chamber with voices raised in anger, confusion, and fear. The massive viewing screens displayed tactical recordings of the engagement, showing the impossible moment when a single human cargo ship had disabled an entire Korath battle fleet. Ambassador Lisa Morgan sat in her usual place with the same calm expression she had worn for 30 years of council sessions. Around her, the other human delegates maintained their characteristic quiet dignity, while alien species demanded explanations for what they had witnessed. War-Prime Vexmore stood at the center of the chamber, his massive form trembling with rage. The shame of having an entire fleet defeated by humans had shaken the very foundation of Korath military pride. His voice carried across the chamber like thunder. "The humans have committed an act of war against the Korath hegemony," he declared. "This unprovoked attack cannot be tolerated." Chancellor Zaythara of the Vex Empire moved forward on her mechanical legs, her cybernetic implants blinking rapidly as she processed the data from the engagement. "The human vessel displayed technology that should not exist," she said. "Our analysis indicates capabilities that exceed current galactic standards by several centuries." Elder Quaneth of the Zephyrian Collective opened his ancient eyes and spoke with the weight of millennia behind his words. "How long has humanity possessed such abilities?" Lisa rose slowly from her seat, waiting for the recognition that would allow her to address the assembled council. The chamber fell silent as every being present focused their attention on the small, human woman who had just witnessed her species reveal capabilities that defied everything they thought they knew about Earth. "Honored representatives," Lisa began, her voice carrying the same measured tone that had marked every human diplomatic statement for 3 decades. "The demonstration in the Kepler system was not an act of aggression. It was an act of defense on behalf of innocent farmers who posed no threat to anyone." "Defense?" Vexmore's mandibles clicked with fury. "You destroyed 3 of our vessels and disabled an entire fleet." "We disabled your weapon systems and prevented you from committing genocide," Lisa corrected gently. "Your crews were unharmed and your ships will be returned once you abandon your claims on Millerian territory." Dr. Helen Carter stood beside her ambassador, activating a holographic display that filled the chamber with detailed schematics and tactical analyses. The images showed Korath military bases, Vex industrial complexes, and Zephyrian research facilities throughout the galaxy. Overlaid on each location were targeting solutions and projected casualty estimates that demonstrated an intelligence network far beyond anything the Council had imagined. "For 30 years, humanity has observed the actions of the Council species," Carter said. "We have watched as peaceful civilizations were conquered, enslaved, or destroyed. We have documented every act of aggression, every violation of basic sentient rights, every abuse of power committed by those who claim to represent galactic civilization." The chamber erupted in angry voices as representatives from dozens of species protested the implications of her words. Chancellor Zaythara's mechanical voice cut through the noise. "You accuse the Council of crimes while hiding your own military capabilities," she said. "How can we trust a species that has deceived us for decades?" Captain Jake Harrison stepped forward, his weathered face showing the patience of someone who had spent 20 years mediating disputes between beings who could crush humanity without effort. "We have never deceived anyone," he said. "We simply chose not to demonstrate our full capabilities, while we hoped the galaxy would learn to resolve conflicts through peaceful means." "Your hope was misplaced," Elder Quaneth observed. "The strong have always dominated the weak. This is the natural order of the universe." Lisa smiled for the first time in 3 decades of council sessions. "Elder Quaneth, that is precisely the attitude we had hoped to change through example and patience. Since diplomacy has proven insufficient, we are prepared to use other methods to protect innocent species from those who would harm them." A holographic figure materialized in the center of the chamber. Captain Steve Rogers appeared as a 3-dimensional image, his uniform marking him as a commander in Earth's previously unknown military forces. His presence sent ripples of shock through the assembled delegates who were still trying to understand how humanity had hidden such capabilities for so long. "As we speak, human forces are positioned throughout Council space," Rogers announced. "We have assets in every major star system, monitoring stations near every military installation, and agents embedded within your most secure facilities. We know the location of every fleet, the strength of every defense, and the vulnerability of every target that matters to your civilizations." The implications of his words settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Species that had considered Themselves masters of galactic politics suddenly realized they had been observed, catalogued, and prepared for by a civilization they had dismissed as harmless farmers and merchants. War Commander Nexuel appeared on the communication screens, broadcasting from the medical facility where he was recovering from his defeat. His voice carried the bitter taste of military failure as he addressed the council. "The humans speak truth," he admitted. "Their technology is beyond our understanding. Their intelligence network spans our territory. Our fleets, our bases, our most secret installations are all known to them. We are defenseless against opponents who have been studying us for 30 years. Chancellor Zythara processed this information through her cybernetic implants, calculating the strategic implications at superhuman speed. What do the humans want?" she asked. Lisa looked around the chamber at the representatives of species that had spent decades treating humanity as useful servants rather than equals. "We want exactly what we have always wanted," she said. "Peaceful coexistence among all sentient species. The protection of innocent civilizations from those who would exploit them. An end to the cycle of conquest and domination that has defined galactic politics for millennia. And if we refuse to accept these terms?" Vexmore asked. Dr. Carter activated another display showing real-time positions of human forces throughout the galaxy. Ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers revealed themselves as advanced warships. Space stations that had appeared to be research facilities showed their true nature as military command centers. Mining operations that had seemed purely economic displayed hidden weapon systems capable of devastating entire planets. "Then you will discover that humanity's politeness was not a sign of weakness," Lisa replied. "It was a choice we made while hoping you would prove worthy of peaceful coexistence. That choice can be reconsidered if necessary." The chamber fell silent as the full scope of humanity's hidden capabilities became clear. For 30 years, Earth had allowed itself to be dismissed and underestimated while secretly preparing for the day when patience would no longer be enough. That day had finally arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the Kepler incident, the galaxy had settled into a new reality that few species fully understood but all had learned to respect. The morning briefing in General Paul Turner's command center beneath the Rocky Mountains displayed a map of galactic space that looked nothing like the territorial divisions that had existed for centuries. Green zones marked areas where human peacekeeping forces had established protection for smaller species. Yellow zones indicated regions where major powers were learning to negotiate rather than simply take what they wanted. Red zones showed the few remaining areas where conflicts continued, though even these were shrinking as word spread about humanity's willingness to intervene. Lieutenant Sophie Banks approached with the daily reports. Her young face showed the quiet satisfaction of someone who had watched her species transform from galactic servants to galactic peacekeepers in less than a year. "The Korath attempt to expand into the Tau Ceti region was halted yesterday," she reported. "Admiral Palmer's task force disabled their advance fleet and escorted them back to hegemony space. No casualties on either side." Turner nodded as he studied the tactical display. The same pattern had repeated itself dozens of times since the demonstration at Kepler. Aggressive species would attempt to continue their old habits of conquest and expansion only to find human forces appearing wherever they tried to threaten peaceful civilizations. "Status on the Vex mining operations in the Outer Rim?" Turner asked. "Colonel Peterson's team has convinced the workers to demand fair wages and proper safety equipment," Banks replied. "The Vex are discovering that slave labor becomes much less profitable when the slaves know they have protection." The transformation had not been limited to military interventions. Throughout the galaxy, human advisors were appearing wherever oppressed populations needed support. They taught negotiation techniques to species that had never been allowed to bargain for their rights. They provided technological assistance to civilizations that had been kept deliberately primitive by their overlords. Most importantly, they offered the implicit promise that any attempt to punish these newly assertive populations would bring swift human response. Ambassador Lisa Morgan still attended council sessions in the crystal chambers of Station Prime, still spoke with the same measured politeness that had marked 30 years of diplomatic service. The difference was that now, when she suggested a solution to galactic problems, the other species listened with the attention that came from understanding the consequences of ignoring her advice. The Millerian colonies had become humanity's first official protectorate, but they were no longer alone. Dozens of smaller species had requested Earth's protection, creating a network of allied worlds that spanned the galaxy. These civilizations provided resources, intelligence, and staging areas for human operations while receiving guaranteed protection from any aggressor. Captain Greg Palmer, now promoted to admiral, commanded the growing fleet of ships that maintained peace throughout human-protected space. His crews still looked like ordinary merchant sailors to casual observers, but their vessels had shed all pretense of being simple cargo haulers. The galaxy now knew that any ship flying Earth's colors carried enough firepower to disable entire battle fleets. Palmer stood on the bridge of his flagship, monitoring a routine patrol through the former conflict zones near Zephyrian space. His tactical officer reported the approach of a small diplomatic vessel requesting permission to speak with human representatives. "It's a Korath courier ship," the officer said. "They're transmitting surrender protocols and requesting safe passage." This had become another common occurrence. Species that had once ruled through fear and intimidation were discovering that their former victims no longer cowered before them. Faced with the choice between adapting to a galaxy where strength was used to protect rather than exploit, or continuing their aggressive ways and facing human intervention, most were choosing adaptation. The courier brought news that War Prime Dexmore had been replaced by a new Korath leader who spoke of trade agreements and mutual cooperation rather than conquest and domination. Similar changes were occurring throughout the territories of species that had built their civilizations on the suffering of others. Dr. Helen Carter worked from her expanded research complex in the Sol system, coordinating humanitarian aid and development assistance for hundreds of worlds. Her teams had shifted from gathering intelligence on potential enemies to studying how different species could work together for mutual benefit. The galaxy was becoming more peaceful, but it required constant attention to maintain that peace. "The refugee situation on New Kepler is stabilizing," she reported to Turner during their weekly coordination meeting. "The former Korath slaves are adapting well to freedom, and their agricultural knowledge is helping the Millerians expand food production." Turner reviewed the reports flowing in from across human space. Conflicts that had raged for centuries were being resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. Species that had been enemies for millennia were discovering they could trade and cooperate when neither side feared unprovoked attack. The galaxy was learning what humanity had always believed, that peace was more profitable than war. When everyone felt secure, the most dramatic changes were visible in the council chambers themselves, where the great powers had once dominated. Through intimidation and threat, they now found themselves participating in genuine negotiations with species they had previously considered too weak to matter. The Zephyrians, wisest among the elder races, had adapted most quickly to the new reality and often worked alongside human representatives to mediate disputes. Elder Queneth had become an unexpected ally, his ancient wisdom complementing humanity's practical approach to problem-solving. During a recent session, he had observed that the galaxy was experiencing its longest period of widespread peace in recorded history. Captain Jake Harrison, now serving as Earth's chief diplomatic coordinator, often reflected on the changes during quiet moments between crises. The constant stream of conflicts that had once required human mediation was slowing to a trickle as species learned that aggressive behavior would bring swift consequences, while peaceful cooperation brought protection and prosperity. "We spent 30 years being polite because we hoped the galaxy would learn to be better," he told his staff during a routine briefing. "Now we're polite because we can afford to be. The galaxy finally understands that kindness backed by strength is very different from kindness born from weakness." The message had been received throughout the galaxy with perfect clarity. Humanity had tried asking nicely for 3 decades. that experiment was over. The results spoke for themselves in the growing peace that spread from system to system, protected by quiet watchers from Earth who had finally stopped pretending to be harmless. In the end, the galaxy learned that humans had been polite not because they were weak, but because they were trying to be good neighbors. Now that politeness served a different purpose as the calm voice of absolute authority, offering choices to those who had forgotten that others deserved the right to choose as, well,